This is Short Hammer. It is the 3rd of September, 2022. And this is Trading Zones. Hopefully, everyone had a wonderful trading week. Like I say, we're not bulls, we're not bears, we're directionally agnostic. All we are people that want range. That's what a trader is. You just want range. And we had some pretty good range this past week. So, what are we looking at right now? We're looking at the RTY, and we've had some, pretty good selling. And we dropped back down to this little chop zone that we had before. If we look back on the 20th, 21st, around, in July, we saw that when we dropped into the 790s, that's when we saw a little bit of buying step in, right? And so we're not surprised at this. So if I'm looking at this, if we do start to see selling below the 790s, that would open up room here down into the 740s, if not lower, down into the 1702 area, if not lower into the 1600s. So you want to watch this and be careful. The preference here is that the buyers step in. This is if you're bullish. You want the buyers to step in for us to get a retrace back above the 1830s and for us to try to get above the 1860s. And then you want to just sort of bend and begin to climb out of this steep dive. I don't know if that's going to happen. There are a lot of this is what's interesting, right? Post Jackson Hole, there has been I would say statements by the Fed when they've made statements that they're going to look at the data. They're not just going to blindly continue to raise rates. They're going to look at the data. And some of the data that's come out has actually not been horrible, right? It's been better than expected data. And so on that type of data, you'd expect the market to try to sort of come out of this tailspin and try to buy back up. But there's a lot to be said about sentiment. And I think that a lot of the buyers are exhausted. Each time we get a wave up, it gets crushed back down. And this is shaping up to be the prototypical bear market, where you get sharp reversals that are then crushed. And I think in this market, you just have to be really careful and trade level to level and take your profit as you go. You got to really be careful because any move can reverse on you at a moment's notice. And so watch these levels just mentioned on the RTY. Initially, based on continued falling new mortgage applications and just a rise in interest rates, people are going to be a little bit skittish to get new debt, right? To just whatever it is, like people are going to be more skittish to get new debt. So that should impact the bank slightly. Though interest rates being higher do benefit banks more because they will make more off of those that do need to open new debt accounts, right? Or need to service the debt that they already have. So they will be able to make more off of that. So the question is, what is based on the difference between new debt, right? And servicing debt that's already there and those that do have to get debt. Since there's a drop off from let's just look at mortgage rates, right? There's been a drop off in new mortgage, not mortgage rates, but drop off in new mortgage applications. So you have to figure out what's the difference. And this is not my area. So if you're trying to do the math on this, how far will banks fall basically until the higher interest rates begins to compensate for the lowering of people doing new business? That's what I'm trying to say. Let's move on, but let's watch these levels. Below here, we see the 1702, 1721. The bottom of the zone here, if we do crack through the 1790s, is down here around 1740s. We'll see if that sort of continues down or if we get a buy back up on the RTY. Let's keep it moving over to the MES. So looking at the MES, we're definitely below this little chop zone and perfect head and shoulders, right? And so now what we want to see is here at this base, do we see continued selling? And it's possible if we don't get buying out of here. This reversal candle was perfect. This slap down was brutal. And so if we continue lower next week, which is possible, we could see a drift down to the 3850s, 3816-ish area, even down here into the 3750s, right? So the goal if I'm a bull is to bend us back up and get us back above the 3960s if possible. That's my goal. That's my initial goal, right? Then if I'm looking at this, and let's drop this down to a 4-hour chart. This is if I'm a bull. If I'm a bull, what I want to do is get us back above this 4015-ish area, right? And you can see that we sort of bounced there. Here we're finding buyers here, and we sort of recruited enough buyers here. You can see that area here into the low 4,000s, 4015-ish area, and we bounced back up, but we hit a brick wall right around these 4070s and right back down through the 4015s, and now we're back testing it, right? What happens? What used to be demand, once we cut through, now becomes supply, perfect technically, and then now we're back down, and buyers try to bid. Look back here, right? We did catch a bid at the 3920s before, at 2 points on the 20th of July, and roughly about the 26th of July also. We try to catch a bid in this area. And if you go back even further, look back at the 8th of July, where that was a topping area where we reversed slightly. And so here again, we are roughly in those 3920s, and we tried to buy back up, but where do we hit our heads? Those 4015-ish areas, and now we're back down. So now what we want to see is, can the buyers hold the 3900 level, right? If they can't, we already mentioned where the separation could be and how far down we can go. I know I dropped down to the 4-hour, right, to show a little bit more of a granular look, right? But if we lose these 3900s, the next area is 3888. We lose that, 3856, 3817. Then we're down to the 3700s, 3772, and we should see something at 3748 if we continue to sell. But if I'm a bull, I want to get us back above the 4015s and then see what we can do with the 4070s if we can get a little bit of a leg through that area. That's what I'd be interested in doing if I was a bull. Let's keep it moving. Okay, MNQ, and same setup here. These things do look a little bit different on the lower time from the 4-hour time frame, but let's get to it. So we saw a tap here, top of the zone, 12.050s, bought out of that, pull right back to it. So now what we need to see is, are we going to hold? If not, if we get a negative drift here further down, the bottom of the zone is 11.710s, right? We might see a hitch here. Where's this area? Right about 11.881. That's a possible hitch. And we did see a slight reversal in this area on 11.970s. So that could provide a little bit of something there. But if we continue to sell below the 1200 level, I'm definitely gonna be looking at 11.710s as the potential area that we can go to. So that's really interesting, right? We could also see a back test up into this area. So we broke this trend line, right? And we were riding that for quite some time. And that was part of this higher lows, higher highs, right? All the way up until we finally made a lower low, lower than this area here, pull back, and this downtrend is intact, right? So even if we buy back up, to try to regain this uptrend, we have to see what happens against this downtrend if they're still going to be selling there. So that's something to watch even if we go sideways. Let's see if we see any push out of this area. But you can look back and see that there have been challenges here. So if we look right here around the 12,450s, we drop down here, bounce out of that area. It seems as if we're going to try to hold the trend, right? Then bearish engulfing, and down we go. Back test trying to get up through that area. 12,511s trying to hold the 12,450s. No dice, back below. And we back tested up into that area here, trying to find a little bit of buying, seeing if we could get a squeeze on to sort of get back through. And that was also rejected, right? And so now what we're watching, these lower levels that I mentioned before on M&NQ. And what you also want to watch for is sector rotation, because there's been, a rotation out of tech and into a few other sectors. And so you want to look around to see what sectors were receiving inflows as the market was going down. We talked about defensive sectors before, energy, consumer staples, just healthcare could be one. You just have to look around to see where are people putting their money, those that have to be in the market. So Amazon played out how we mentioned. If we lose the 136s, watch out for the 124s. We saw a slight bounce here, as we should. If we sell back through, the next area is here on the pop gold, the 121.97 area. Below that, we might see a hitch right around this area, the 115.90s, then it's 106.96s. If we can hold here and get a little bit of buying in, we might see a pullback here into the 132-ish area, 132.60-ish, it looks like. If we get above that, pop gray, pop blue, we can squeeze into the 136.50s. But I don't know if tech, because once you start to see that rotation, I don't know if people are going to go back into tech and start bidding tech up. So that'll be interesting here as far as Amazon specifically, right? And Amazon selling is not actually a bad thing. September is usually a tough month if you're a bull. And so if we happen to draw down even more, it'd be definitely a better positioning heading into the holiday seasons, right? So that'd be interesting. Those are levels to watch on Amazon. Let's keep it moving. Head on over to Netflix. There was some mention of Netflix and that they're trying to sell their advertising at top dollar. We'll see how that plays out for them. I'll watch the 220s here. And that's level to watch. Watch the 220s, like 220.75. Right through, right in this area. Through 220. They would need to really remount the 229 area, and that may open up the 233s. You can see that in here. These ledges that I'm watching. Yeah, 233s could remount. Then down here, watch the tops around the 207s. We have a line here around 204. See if there's anything there. If we happen to get down there, continue to sell. Then below that, we have the 174, but above that 174 area, we might see a little bit of action around the 192 area on Netflix, right? But be careful. There's a lot of outflows. NVIDIA just got hit with news. I think the U.S. no longer wishes them to sell chips to China, them and a few other companies. So that definitely put a damper on the market, definitely put a damper on chips. But if we remember the previous setup, what we mentioned was this area here. Once we're above, we should try to bid. Below, we should try to sell. And we're definitely dipping pretty aggressively here. So if we're looking at NVIDIA, what are the levels that we can look for that we might see buyers try? This is the level 138.47. Next up is 119, but in between there, you see this little bit of turbulence here on the 134s. So that might prove to be something here. This 136-ish area is also something. Below that area is 129. I might draw something there. It seems like to be an area. If we look back here, this is from 2020 that we definitely saw some bidding in the 128s. Up to around the 134-ish, 136-ish areas. That's interesting on NVIDIA. right? So we want to see how that works out. With that type of news hanging over you, where you may lose a portion of your market, that could really impact a company's ability to be able to meet earnings estimates. So depending on, and this is something that you have to dig into, right? Dig into and figure out how, sort of dig into the numbers, figure out what portion of their revenue does China comprise? Like, is China 5%, 10%, 15%? So whatever projections that they made for their next earnings, depending how long this thing by the U.S. government, this order by the U.S. government to not sell chips to China, depending how long that may last, that could have an impact on earnings. So that's going to be interesting to watch on NVIDIA. That's something to watch out for. That might be interesting. If we happen to hold the 138s, look for a push up. First area I'd be watching is right around here, the 153s. But I wouldn't be incredibly bullish on NVIDIA at the moment. We have to see how it plays out. And sort of as that news is digested and the details come out, it'll probably play out this week. And the investors and those that trade NVIDIA on a weekly basis, they'll start to make that decision on how bad is the news really, and how much of the addressable market does China make up. So that's going to be interesting. Okay, let's keep it moving on over onto Microsoft. Microsoft, interesting level here, right off the 254s. Let me flip this back to a daily chart to see if we see any clear levels there. And open this up. Okay. So we see that there is a shelf here, but that's around 259. We're below that. So there is a potential to see buying here around this 254-ish area, but there's also a potential that we could drift lower down to around 249, right above the pop gold. So that's possible too, for us to go lower into the 254s and maybe even down here around the 242s. But right here around the 248-ish area, there is definitely you can see the reversals here that we've been below but not spent many days below. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much Microsoft is going to be impacted by some of the current news. This could just be just following the market because it has no news of its own. But what you want to watch for with stocks like Microsoft, definitely dig into their previous earnings and sort of what their I'll say their future projections are, what their guidance looks like. That's really important to look at, because a lot of these companies are predicting that there will be some sort of a recession in 2023. And that's the reason why they're laying off some of their most, I say, costly workers as they begin to sort of maneuver and pivot their businesses to prepare for that potential. So what you want to dig into is that based on that information, if a company like Microsoft is positioned to do well in 2023, even if there's a recession, how does that impact their clients, right? And if their guidance is we're going to have to lay off some workers to prepare for this, to be able to cut overhead, to be able to do well in a recession, and we do expect to do well next earnings, then you look for levels like this, where this pop gold is, right? Where you see these different the bounces on different days where we have reversals, right around these 240s, 248s, 249-ish areas. Those are areas where you look to see if the buyers are stepping in, and if you're seeing inflows into Microsoft, meaning that the investors are saying, hey, this is a good level where I feel safe beginning to build my position around this area, right? So even if we sort of drift a little bit lower, I'll average a little bit of different levels, because I believe this is a good level for Microsoft, where I do believe that from here, we have a good value, that this is a good value. I don't mind holding this for the next 6 months to a year. And I think that we're going to buy back up to a specific level that I feel that it'll be worth my investment, right? So that's something to watch for on Microsoft, and maybe a few other tickers. Hopping on over to Apple. This is, let's see where Apple is. kind of in no man's land above the 149s, but back at the 149, we might see a little bit of buying or not, because we could see a little bit more of a drift. Earnings coming up on the 3rd of November, still a bit out. So we do want to see, though. If you look at the market overall, Apple's held up pretty well under a lot of pressure in the market. So Apple may have more room to go, but remember that Apple is one of those tickers that's in the basket for a lot of hedge funds, a lot of retirement funds. They do have Apple in them. So let's see. It could drop down here into the 150 level. Let's drop this on the 4-hour to see if we can see a little bit more, if it adds a little bit more texture to the chart. And that it does. Okay, so from here, we see that we're trying to hold this level. If we lose this 155 level, the next level that we're going to be watching for is potentially the 152.23s. Then there is a dip into the 149.90s and maybe even lower. But we do see some previous candle structure right around the 149-ish area that we may see buyers begin to try to get in there to get a slight relief bounce. That's possible. If we happen to head back up, we're below the pop gold, and a push into that area is around 158.80s, 158.60s. Got to see how that plays out. That's interesting on Apple. Let's see. Definitely want to take a peek at Tesla. Always interesting. Tesla at the 270 area. Below here, we have the 259, then the 231. It is possible we could go lower. Yeah, it looks like the 259 is the first area. Here, okay, the 270 is a potential area where buyers may try, but it looks like they try and we may pull back to the 274, and then we may go down even lower to the 259. And then from that area, we might see a little bit of a pullback into the 270, but we probably will end up down here around the 231 area on Tesla here. So we might see some buying here around the 259. Watch that, see if there are cash inflows there or not. But definitely be careful. Looks like we have earnings coming up on the 18th of October. And I don't know. The last thing we heard was that they were taking significant, they had a significant drop in sales in China. And so whatever their guidance was, not sure how many of that, how much of that, as far as this current drop, is already priced in. But that will be interesting to see. Okay, if you're having challenges in the Asian market, what does your guidance look like going forward, right? And you do see other entrants like Ford and GM that are trying to do more in the electric space. And you see something like what California is saying, and you see this is sort of where the politics become interesting, right? When Elon leaves a place like California and goes to Texas, would that make California more open to doing business with Ford and bringing in electric vehicles from Ford and maybe doing deals with Ford, right? To be able to help Ford, who they may feel maybe a little bit less fickle, that might, drop anchor in a place like California that's saying that by 2035, I believe the date is, they wish for the vehicles to be fully electric, like the new vehicles that are coming on the road, I believe. So that's interesting. That's something that's interesting that people much smarter than me will dig into. But definitely watch these levels on Tesla. If we do regain the 270s and we hold, watch the 275, then watch the 286-ish area. Those are areas to definitely watch on Tesla. And CMG. So it's always awesome. 1548. We pull back up here. 1622 has such great range. From here, we should either see an extension up to the 654 area. Then if we can find buyers, then push up into the 679, this next pivot. But the reality is we're probably going to see a pullback down here into the 1592. and we might bounce around a bit in here, because if you look here, we see that we've seen sort of a bounce out of this area. Even the bounces don't seem to go too far, so we might see a little bit of a ping pong between this area and a loss of the 1548 area potentially, and give us a drop down around the 1509 or 1522. Just have to see how this plays out. This is a nice pullback here, but we'll see if we can, if the market can recruit buyers, or if CMG can recruit buyers and get them to crest the pop gold here around 1654. That's what's going to be interesting there. Okay, take a peek over at Meta. Okay, looking at Meta, it's in the box. So 155, that's where we, probably going to end up. And so between this 155 previous videos, remember these levels, to 170 is the box that we're back in, right? Had a brief peekaboo outside of that box, but now we're back there. If we happen to drift below these 155-ish areas, then we want to watch out for the 150. And below that, the 139, the 131. If we're holding in here from the 155-ish area, no, this line is not straight. We can pull back into the 161 area. And then maybe attempt to find a little bit of purchasing, pull back into the 166-ish area. But we'll see how this goes on Meta. I just don't see, I know they're putting out, Microsoft, I believe the military just did a deal with Microsoft for goggles. Meta, as far as them really pushing the metaverse and pushing Oculus Rift, we'll see how that plays out for them. But it feels as if they're pivoting away from advertising being the core of their business. I mentioned in previous videos. If you want to get into that, you can check some of those past videos out where I really get into Meta. We'll see sort of how that plays out, because usually when a company is pivoting, there is a dead area where they're losing some of the old business they used to do as they're pivoting away from that, as they're trying to gain footing in the new areas they're trying to expand their business into. And usually that in between portion as they're pivoting is slightly turbulent for the company, and also maybe not great for profits, but it ends up being good, in the future, longer term. And take a peek over at CI. We did mention healthcare, so not as red as, the rest of the market. We've seen issues, so it's almost as if we're between the two. You can almost drop it down to here, the 283 area by the 292 is turbulence, right? So you can technically draw a line there and wait for a break outside of that area. If we go below the 280s, look out for the 278 area. Then below that, look out for the 271s. If we happen to break this 292, may have clear skies here. Yeah, clear skies. So we have to see. We have to see how this plays out. Yep, this is interesting to watch. If you're looking at the candle structure here, why is this pulling back? It's not giving me the pull I want. Open up, open up. Okay. Yeah, I'm leaving this alone. I don't like this movement. I'll set some alerts probably around this 293-ish area. Then below this 283. And when we get below that, I'll look and see if there's a move. Interesting here on CI. Okay, but yeah, not a huge fan. Okay. One of the things that I think is interesting, the UTY. What was it? Just type it in this way. XLU, that's what we are. Okay. I think utilities are interesting, right? So one of the things to remember is that because inflation is so high, utilities have been nuts. So once inflation is under control, I would expect utilities to really drop, right? And that's something that's really interesting. If inflation is going down, then the cost of your utility should also go down, which means the utility company should be less profitable. So that's something that I think is interesting. And I'm going to look to try to put a play on that, because I do expect there to be some type of a movement in utilities. I do think also that you have to be careful because some people do tend to jump into different type of energy plays or utility plays for safety when the market's kind of turbulent. But I do think that longer term, this is going to go down as inflation goes down. So that's something I think that's slightly interesting. I have to fish that out or flesh that out a little bit more. And I'll get back into that at a later date. And am I forgetting anything? Intel getting hammered. Yeah, Intel's getting hammered. Yeah, I don't have anything for Intel. I have to dig into these charts on Intel. But Intel is taking it in the shorts. This is interesting for Intel, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that are getting into Intel because let's flip this to a 1 month. And sometimes I know it looks kind of funky. Mm-hmm. Yep, they can go lower. But yeah, how much lower will Intel go? And I think some people may feel that the action on Intel may be overdone. And we'll see how Intel plays out. Not touching Intel personally, not right now. Looking at Dollar Tree, looks as if it's trying to build a base here. We'll see how this plays out right around these 134-ish areas. And looks like it's by the 138s. So maybe a pulse to the 140 will give us something. Yep, maybe some sort of a pullback here. This has been a steep sell-off. But it's sort of chopping around right now. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm gonna be watching this. I'm gonna put some lines around this to alert me in case it moves. I think I'm gonna stop right there and call it a day. SPY is interesting. We'll run over the futures. This looks interesting, but we're gonna stop here. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to get more of videos like this, please subscribe to our channel, Power of Pivots, on YouTube, where you can look forward to getting videos from me and also videos from Melissa as she gets into how she utilizes her power of pivot strategy to find great pre-market, intraday, and post-market entries and trades. Have a wonderful week of trading. And always remember, you are one trade away.